Once hailed as a land of upright people, Burkina Faso has stood at the crossroads of revolution and repression for decades. From the fiery leadership of Thomas Sankara to the raw defiance of Captain Ibrahim Traoré, this small West African nation has dared to challenge global powers, shake off colonial chains, and carve its own path, no matter the cost. But how did we get here? What forces shaped this rebellion? And what does the future hold for a country torn between chaos and courage? This is the untold story of Burkina Faso, from revolution to resistance, and the fearless men who dared to rewrite its destiny. In the late 19th century, the region now known as Burkina Faso fell under French colonial rule, becoming part of French West Africa. The territory was named Upper Volta in 1919, reflecting a position along the upper stretches of the Volta River. Under colonial administration, the indigenous populations faced forced labor, heavy taxation, and suppression of local customs. The French prioritized resource extraction and infrastructure that served colonial interests, leaving the majority of the population in poverty and without access to education or health care. The mid-20th century saw a wave of decolonization across Africa. In Upper Volta, nationalist sentiments grew, leading to the establishment of political parties and increased demand for self-governance. On August 5, 1960, Upper Volta gained independence from France, with Maurice Yameogo becoming the first president. However, the new nation faced significant challenges, including political instability, economic dependency on former colonial powers, and internal divisions. The post-independence period was marked by a series of military coups and short-lived governments. Economic hardships and dissatisfaction with political elites led to frequent changes in leadership. Amid this instability, a young and charismatic army captain named Thomas Sankara emerged as a prominent figure, known for his progressive ideas and dedication to social justice. In 1983, Thomas Sankara was appointed prime minister but was soon arrested due to his radical views. This sparked a popular uprising, and on August 4, 1983, a coup led by Captain Blaise Compaoré brought Sankara to power. At just 33 years old, Sankara became president and initiated a bold program of social, economic, and political reforms aimed at transforming the nation. Sankara's government prioritized self-sufficiency and anti-imperialism. He renamed the country Burkina Faso, meaning land of upright people. His administration launched mass vaccination campaigns, built schools and health centers, promoted women's rights by banning female genital mutilation and forced marriages, and initiated reforestation projects to combat desertification. Sankara also reduced government spending by selling luxury vehicles and cutting salaries of public officials. Despite widespread support, Sankara faced opposition from traditional leaders, elites, and foreign powers uncomfortable with his radical policies. On October 15, 1987, Captain Blaise Compaoré seized power in a coup that resulted in the assassination of his close friend and revolutionary leader, Thomas Sankara. Compaoré justified the takeover as a rectification of the revolution, aiming to correct what he perceived as Sankara's missteps. This marked the beginning of a 27-year presidency that would leave an indelible mark on Burkina Faso's political landscape. In the early years of his rule, Compaoré moved swiftly to consolidate power. In 1989, he accused two of his closest allies, Jean-Baptiste Boukouré-Lingani and Henry Zongo, of plotting a coup. Both were arrested and executed, eliminating potential rivals and sending a clear message to dissenters. This action solidified Compaoré's grip on power and marked a shift towards a more authoritarian regime. Compaoré introduced economic reforms aimed at liberalizing the economy and attracting foreign investment. Under his leadership, Burkina Faso became one of the first countries to prepare a full poverty reduction strategy paper, PASP, in 2000. These policies led to an average GDP growth of 5.8% in the early 2000s, compared to 2.3% in Africa as a whole. However, the benefits of this growth were unevenly distributed, and poverty remained widespread. Despite economic progress, Compaoré's tenure was marred by political repression and human rights abuses. In 1998, the assassination of investigative journalist Norbert Zongo, who was probing the death of a driver linked to Compaoré's brother, sparked nationwide protests. The government's failure to bring those responsible to justice highlighted the regime's intolerance for dissent and raised concerns about the rule of law. On the international stage, Compaoré positioned himself as a key mediator in West African conflicts, including those in Ivory Coast and Mali. His efforts earned him recognition as a stabilizing force in the region. However, allegations surfaced that his government had supported rebel movements in neighboring countries, casting a shadow over his diplomatic endeavors. In 2014, Compaoré attempted to amend the constitution to extend his presidency beyond the two-term limit. This move ignited mass protests across the country. Demonstrators stormed the parliament and set it ablaze, demanding an end to his rule. Facing mounting pressure, Compaoré resigned on October 31, 2014, and fled to Ivory Coast, ending nearly 3 decades of authoritarian governance. Blaise Compaoré's long rule left a complex legacy. While he brought economic growth and played a role in regional diplomacy, his tenure was also characterized by political repression and human rights violations. In 2022, he was tried in absentia and sentenced to life imprisonment for his role in Thomas Sankara's assassination. With Blaise Compaoré's abrupt departure in October 2014, Burkina Faso stood at a critical crossroads. A transitional government, led by former diplomat Michel Kafando, was established to stabilize the nation and organize democratic elections. Despite an attempted coup by the elite Presidential Security Regiment, ISP, in September 2015, swiftly quashed by public resistance and loyalist forces, the country managed to conduct credible elections later that year. In November 2015, Roch-Marc Christian Kabore, a former prime minister under Compaoré who had distanced himself from the regime, was elected as Burkina Faso's new president. His election marked the first peaceful transfer of power via the ballot box in the country's history, a significant milestone in a region plagued by instability. Kabore's administration prioritized education, infrastructure, and economic reforms. Under his leadership, Burkina Faso saw modest development progress, including rural electrification programs and road construction. There was hope that the country could finally begin a new chapter rooted in democratic governance. Yet, as hopes rose in Ouagadougou, a growing storm gathered in the northern and eastern regions. Beginning around 2016, Burkina Faso became engulfed in a rapidly escalating Islamist insurgency. Militants linked to Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, ECOWAS, and the Islamic State in the Greater Sahara, ISGS, began launching attacks targeting civilians, government forces, and symbols of the state. By 2019, entire provinces in the north and east had become ungovernable. Armed groups moved freely, imposing their own rules. Thousands of schools were closed, basic healthcare systems collapsed, and over 1.5 million people were displaced by the end of 2022. Insecurity became the defining challenge of Compaoré's presidency. To respond, the government formed volunteer militias known as the Volunteers for the Defense of the Homeland, VDP, but these poorly equipped and undertrained groups often found themselves overwhelmed. Morale within the army deteriorated. In some cases, communities accused security forces of abuses, worsening public trust. Burkina Faso relied heavily on Western partners, particularly France and the United States, for intelligence and training. Operation Barkhane and the G5 Sahel initiative were launched to combat terrorism in the region, but results were limited. Many Burkinabe began to view France's military presence as ineffective or even counterproductive. Anti-French sentiments grew, fueled by frustration, conspiracy theories, and a sense of abandonment by international partners. As attacks increased and the government failed to regain territory or protect civilians, public anger boiled over. Protests erupted across the country, not only against the government but also against foreign powers. Calls for a new approach, even a more radical one, began to dominate public discourse. Despite the turmoil, Compaoré was re-elected in November 2020. But the victory was hollow. By 2021, nearly half the country was under threat from jihadists. Faith in democratic governance dwindled as insecurity worsened and governance faltered. The seeds of a second military intervention had been sown. On January 24, 2022, the military struck again. Led by Lieutenant Colonel Paul-Henri Sandaogo Damiba, the Patriotic Movement for Safeguard and Restoration, MPSR, ousted Compaoré, citing his inability to deal with insecurity. Once again, the Burkinabe people found themselves under military rule, with the promise of security and sovereignty replacing the hopes of democratic stability. On September 30th, 2022, Burkina Faso experienced its second coup in less than 9 months. Discontent within the military ranks had reached a boiling point. Lieutenant Colonel Paul-Henri Sandaogo Damiba, who had seized power in January 2022 promising to quell the jihadist insurgency, was ousted by a group of young officers. Leading this faction was Captain Ibrahim Traoré, a 34-year-old artillery officer who had become a symbol of frustration with the status quo. Born on March 14, 1988, in Bondakui, Muhun Province, Ibrahim Traoré pursued geology at the University of Ouagadougou, where he was active in student associations, including the Marxist-leaning ANEB. In 2009, he joined the military, receiving training at the Georges Namahano Military Academy. His service included deployments in northern Burkina Faso and participation in UN peacekeeping missions in Mali, where he gained first-hand experience in counterinsurgency operations. Traoré's experiences on the front lines exposed him to the challenges faced by Burkinabe's soldiers: inadequate equipment, delayed salaries, and a sense of abandonment by the political leadership. As the security situation deteriorated, Traoré and like-minded officers grew increasingly critical of Damiba's leadership, perceiving a disconnect between the government's promises and the realities on the ground. The coup unfolded swiftly. Traoré and his allies, reportedly with support from elements of the Cobra Special Forces, detained Damiba and dissolved the transitional government. On October 6, 2022, Traoré was officially declared president of Burkina Faso and head of the Patriotic Movement for Safeguard and Restoration. He pledged to prioritize security and restore territorial integrity. Under Traoré's leadership, Burkina Faso undertook a significant realignment of its foreign policy. The government expelled French military forces and suspended several agreements with France, signaling a move away from traditional Western alliances. In their place, Traoré sought partnerships with nations like Russia, Iran, and Turkey, aiming to diversify Burkina Faso's international relations and assert greater sovereignty. Traoré initiated comprehensive military reforms, including the creation of specialized units and increased investment in defense. The government reported significant territorial gains, reclaiming areas previously under insurgent control. These efforts aim to restore state authority and provide security to displaced populations. Beyond security, Traoré's administration launched initiatives to revitalize the economy and improve public services. Projects included the establishment of processing facilities for agricultural products, infrastructure development, and efforts to enhance healthcare delivery. These programs sought to address long-standing socio-economic challenges and promote self-sufficiency. Despite these efforts, Traoré's government faced criticism from human rights groups and international observers. Allegations emerged regarding forced conscription, suppression of dissent, and delays in the promised transition to civilian rule. The administration's reliance on emergency powers and the postponement of elections raised concerns about democratic backsliding. As Burkina Faso navigates this complex period, the nation stands at a crossroads. The government's actions have garnered both support and skepticism. The coming years will be pivotal in determining whether Traoré's leadership can deliver lasting stability and development, or if the cycle of unrest will persist. Burkina Faso, a landlocked country with a resilient spirit, now stands at a defining moment in its history. Under the young leadership of Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the country has broken away from traditional diplomatic alignments, taken a bold stance on sovereignty, and committed to fighting the scourge of terrorism that has plagued its people for years. But for every gain, there are still pressing challenges ahead. While government forces have reclaimed some territory, jihadist groups continue to pose a lethal threat, especially in remote areas. The risk of over-reliance on paramilitary groups like Russia's Wagner or its successors raises fears of long-term dependency, human rights abuses, and loss of national control. Diplomatically, Traoré's pivot away from the West toward non-traditional allies is a gamble. As Burkina Faso withdraws from ECOWAS and aligns more closely with Mali and Niger in a new Sahelian alliance, questions arise. Will these partnerships yield security and stability? Or will they further isolate the country from much-needed international aid and trade? Economically, Burkina Faso faces the immense task of rebuilding a fragile system. Inflation, high youth unemployment, and rural poverty continue to fuel discontent. But there is hope. New agricultural initiatives, small-scale industrial development, and nationalistic policies aimed at self-reliance may, in time, create opportunities for sustainable growth. Socially, the wounds of conflict and displacement run deep. Over 2 million Burkinabés are internally displaced, and communities across the country live in fear. Healing and rebuilding trust in public institutions will take time, inclusive policies, and a clear roadmap towards civilian governance. And politically, the question of democracy looms large. Traoré has promised a transition, but no clear election date has been set. The international community watches closely, while many citizens remain cautiously hopeful that this time, change will be real and lasting. Burkina Faso's journey is far from over. From its revolutionary past to its uncertain present, from Thomas Sankara to Ibrahim Traoré, the nation's fate now lies in the choices of its people and in the hands of a young captain turned president. Whether Ibrahim Traoré becomes a bridge toward a new era of self-determination or a symbol of another chapter in endless transition will be written in the months and years to come. If you found this documentary insightful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for more in-depth African-focused stories from AfriEye. Share your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe Traoré can lead Burkina Faso to peace and prosperity? Or is the country walking a tightrope with uncertain footing? This is AfriEye, where we see Africa clearly through stories that matter.